This is to introduce the Chapter 4 from our course book on the fundamentals of linguistics. This chapter talks about the structure of English texts in general. We have already seen on Chapter 3 a pragmatic observation of language in context. This is how the text itself is structured within itself. So, although we may believe it to be a syntactical analysis, it's still in the realm of pragmatics, and it goes beyond, it goes toward the discourse. But our textbook already expresses things as if you knew a few details that you may not know. So, this I have prepared for you a presentation, a slideshow presentation to help you understand the theories that the previous texts had already presented to you. Remember, both the course book and this PowerPoint presentation in PDF format are available to you on the virtual campus. The textbook mentioned Michael Halliday, who started publishing his works in Australia in the 1960s and moved on. He later came back to England where he continued. He proposed an introduction to functional linguistics. Como assim linguística funcional? Examinando as funções de comunicação. He started from the perspective that language is a system of choices the speaker uses to communicate. Então, a língua permite que você use as coisas de um modo ou de outro. Você sempre tem mais de uma forma de falar. E você escolhe dentro do sistema da sua língua. This is how Halliday observed it. And then he proposed his systemic functional grammar, that we call SFG. Em português, costumamos dizer gramática sistêmico-funcional, com hífen, e a gente costuma se referir a ela geralmente como GSF por conta disso. Só que a partir desses trabalhos, outros trabalhos foram desenvolvidos até virar todo um campo da linguística. Linguística sistêmico-funcional, LSF, in English, Systemic Functional Linguistics, SFL. In this grammar, and also in this linguistics, we always observe three meta functions, that is, functions toward the functions, meta functions. They co-occur simultaneously all the time. Ideational, the representation of reality. Você pode dizer que a metafunção ideacional são as ideias em si, aquilo que você quer comunicar. Os seus esquemas imagéticos, uma perspectiva chomskiana, antes da estrutura superficial. Interpersonal, how the speaker interrelates with the listener. Here we are not talking about only oral speech, any kind of communication. Rather than using other terms, Halliday just calls these people speaker and listener, even if the text is written or signed or anything. So the interpersonal metafunction has to do with how you place yourself in front of the others. Are you asking the other person to observe you? Are you giving a command? Are you expressing yourself that you're sorry? Remember the speech act theory that we had already observed in our previous chapter? This is also applicable here. And textual means how you organize the message. What do you use to begin the message? What do you use to finish? Where do you place the information the hearer already knows? Where do you put the newsworthy piece of information? We'll discuss that soon enough. All of these pieces of information must connect to form a text. A text must have texture. Em português é até mais fácil. Texto. Quem já viu uma indústria têxtil? É aquilo que faz tecido, não é? Então, o texto tem tessitura, ele é um tecido. Você tece um texto. You weave a text just like a piece of fabric. It must have texture. The ideas must be connected and flow together to make a whole. So the textual meta function, among other things, will also show how information is correlated inside, how the ideas connect, and in what order, what comes first, what comes later, what effect this causes. Of course, you will again have to apply ideational elements, taking interpersonality into consideration. Remember, all three metafunctions co-occur always simultaneously. So, if a text has cohesion, that means it includes cohesive links, connectives, words that connect the meaning, while coherence has to do with the ideas, not the words, being connected, flowing, making sense. Cohesion means, are you using connective words that help you understand? Na coesão, você está usando palavras que conectam essas ideias, elos coesivos. Na coerência, essas ideias fazem sentido em conjunto. A good text, well, instead of saying good or bad, we could say an effective text, a powerful text, a text that gets you where you want. Remember our previous chapter? We were talking about locutionary acts, allocutionary acts. If your locutionary act gets you the required illocutionary act with no negative issues concerning the perlocutionary acts, then your text is effective. To be effective, among other things, it should be cohesive, meaning the words should connect the meanings, and the ideas should also be coherent. Those ideas must make sense together. Let's see how these two ideas differ. Observe, for example, this text. I want to go out tomorrow, since I love my room, and blue flowers can't swim in the sky. Although I wonder if there aren't any cookies in the hardcover books. Well, it's easy to see that this text does not make much sense. Grammatically, however, everything is there. We have cohesive links. The subject, what you want to do, since. Since means you are saying one thing because of the other, one thing as a consequence to the other. And putting ideas together, although indicating an opposition. If indicating a condition. All of these are cohesive links. So this text is cohesive. Why doesn't it work? Because it's not coherent. That's what it lacks. É isso que lhe falta. It lacks coherence. The ideas don't make sense together, even if the words connecting the ideas are there. Now, let's examine this other one. Jimmy is a carpenter. Jimmy makes furniture. His furniture is all made of wood. A carpenter works with wood. Jimmy's furniture is all sturdy. All his furniture looks good. There are no grammatical problems here exactly. But there are no linking words. Here we have all of these adverbs, we have a reference, we have conjunctions. We don't have any of that. Jimmy is a carpenter. Jimmy makes furniture. His furniture is all made of wood. Although the ideas connect, the person, you talk about the same person, saying what they build, which has to do with their occupation, then about this thing they build, what it's made of, because this person uses this material, and then you say something else about this thing he works with, and you give any results here. The ideas are connected, the ideas flow, there is coherence, but the language is breaking up. Everything is broken, it's intermittent, it does not connect, it lacks cohesion, even though it is coherent. This text is coherent. How can we also make it cohesive? Jimmy is a carpenter, so he works with wood. Then we use a pronoun. He makes good-looking, sturdy furniture. We start with the given information, meaning information that the listener probably already has, guiding the message. Carpenter, in this first clause, is the newsworthy piece of information. It carries the focus. It's what I wish to announce. It is the new information. It is very typical to start your clauses or sentences with given information and move towards the new. Given, new, given, new. If I break it and put something new, you may have a paragraph break because you are changing the subject. When it comes to what comes first and in what order, Halliday would refer to everything from the beginning up to where the first ideational element is found as the theme. Remember, any terms from the systemic functional grammar must come with capital initials, at least according to Michael Halliday. So Jimmy is the theme. It's the first idea expressed, the first ideational element. And it guides us towards everything else. The rest of the sentence is a carpenter, is called rime. It's the rime. Em português chamamos de tema e rema. Aí sem o H em português. Carpenter is the last ideational element, and it is where we put a focus on speaking. Jimmy is a carpenter. Jimmy is a carpenter. So carpenter has the focus. The focus. We call it the new in the rime. Peter Henry Fries in 1985 he proposed this category, the N rime. That's not mentioned in our course book, but it's still useful. So the information flows. This is the flow of information. The new may be mentioned again, or it may be dropped. That will be the thematic progression working towards the flow of information. Now, we analyze all of this in a notion that could be called register. Some people talk about text types and about genres. Halliday refers to them as register, but indicating elements. For Halliday, and also for Ruqayya Hassan, the linguist with whom he often worked, actually, Ruqayya Hassan was his wife. He refers that the register is comprised of three elements. The field, em português é o campo. What is it about? É sobre o quê? It is somewhat connected to the idea of the ideational metafunction. Não quer dizer que é necessariamente metafunção ideacional o campo. Não necessariamente. Mas tem alguma conexão. As ideias expressas são o campo. Relações, in English, tenor. The tenor is who is talking, who is listening, from whom to whom. And this is somewhat, kind of, partly connected to the interpersonal metafunction, from whom to whom. And then the mode. Is it spoken? Is it written? Is it filmed? Is it signed? Is it a film with subtitles? All of these are the mode, which has to do with how the message is presented. This is somewhat linked to the textual metafunction. When you get the register, which is the combination of field plus tenor plus mode. That's the register. Once you associate the register with a social function, you have the genre. One genre, many genres. Our course book mentions that other theoreticians, other theorists actually, they do not always agree on the differences between register and genre and text type. So our course book by Charles Myers, that course book just calls everything registers and stops there. They don't go deeper. But this is complicated because later he mentions genres. The truth is, at least for Halliday and for functional perspectives in general, the register becomes a genre once you associate it with a social function. For example, a letter that you write. You're writing a letter, you will mail it at the post office. Maybe your letter is typed, maybe it's handwritten. You will have it printed if you type it on a computer. You place it in an envelope. You address the envelope to someone. You also indicate the sender. All of this is a register, but what is the social function of the letter? Well, let's see first the register. What is the letter about? From whom to whom? The mode is probably written as it is a letter, but it could be typed. Suppose that it's typed or it's handwritten. Is it similar? Some authors may believe it is. Others may believe that there is a subtle difference. It depends on your theoretical perspective. But what is the letter about? Well, suppose it's a love letter from me to my beloved, and I wrote it by hand, and I use scented paper in a beautiful envelope. That will look very different from a business letter. The social function emerges from the register once you analyze all of these factors together. So, what about a short text message on your cell phone? Is it written? Well, it's typed on a phone, close enough to written. But is it closer to something you write on a book or to something you tell a person sitting next to you in a room? Normally, short text messages on cell phone, they are written, but they have many aspects from spoken registers. So they are somewhat hybrid. Another case of hybridism would be in a lecture, uma palestra. Ela é falada, né? Mas você está seguindo um roteiro. Então ela lembra uma coisa escrita, publicada, embora ela seja falada. It is spoken, but it has many characteristics that would be more typical from written registers, even published written texts. How about movie subtitles? Well, the movie itself is a film, right? But and the subtitles? They are written on the screen, but they are a translation or maybe a transcription of what is being said. So it is the written representation of speech. Is a subtitled movie the same register as a dubbed movie? Someone replaced the audio. Many would argue that subtitles are not a register. The register is the subtitled movie. And then a dubbed movie is another register. And a movie in its original language with no subtitles would be yet another register. Each genre may have subgenres, which may have sub-subgenres. The same applies for registers. But all of this is not really core linguistics because it extrapolates to the social level. So, although it is linguistics, it's already touching applied linguistics. Core linguistics, or just linguistics, as we have seen already in Chapter 1, it is the scientific study of language, é o estudo científico da linguagem, é a linguística propriamente dita. while applied linguistics is an interdisciplinary field of studies concerning language. It extrapolates more, it goes into social areas, visual areas, and other things. Core linguistics may not necessarily, but it is common for them to elicit an example. They come up with a fake example to exemplify a concept because they are only trying to explain language within language itself, while applied linguistics is trying to describe a reality, combining it with other disciplinary fields. So they may usually prefer to use an authentic example from a real use of the language. If you get lots of texts together for a specific purpose, under any specified criteria that you have, remember, one criterion, many criteria. You specify how you are going to group these texts together, put them together. You are building a corpus. One corpus, many corpora. The word is Latin. One corpus, many corpora. We often do this when analyzing the organization and even the flow of information, or the vocabulary, the lexicon, or the frequency of words, or probability of any collocations and words that come together. All of these may be done in textual linguistics. But here I will focus on annotating a corpus towards the flow of information. Whatever you want to do with a corpus, you may wish to annotate it. You will add tags to it, and those tags indicate parts of speech if it is parsing, or they may indicate instead any other category with which you are working. Here, let's imagine a manual annotation about theme and end rime. A researcher may annotate a corpus for a specific study. A researcher, okay, ideational, the theme is here. May annotate a corpus for a specific study is the rime. Observe how I speak. A researcher may annotate a corpus for a specific study. A specific study. I raise my tone here. So this is the new. A specific study. That is the N rime. The new in the rime. Of course, you can also build corpora because you are trying to make a dictionary. If you are a lexicographer, well, lexicography means making dictionaries. You will collect examples from corpora, electronic corpora. You will see them in use, see the examples, see how they are used. Or if you're only building a glossary, that's terminology. It is for a specific kind of text, a specific topic, a specific genre. But thematic organization is very useful when you want to analyze the thematic progression, meaning where one piece of information reappears, if it is given, if it is new, when the new becomes a given in the next sentence, to analyze the flow of information, which will describe the texture of the text. I believe that all of these pieces of information were necessary to introduce our chapter, but the author didn't really mention them so clearly. Instead, they only mentioned the necessity for coherence and cohesion to talk about communicative dynamism, the end focus, the new and given information, the register. All of these I have just explained to you differently. But please do read this chapter. Read this chapter thoroughly. Leiam esse texto minuciosamente para poder fazer a atividade. Só revendo aqui, então. Ele vai falar de uma coisa ainda que eu não falei. If two individuals are engaging in a casual conversation, what they say will be divided into speaker turns. One speaker will speak, followed by another, with each person observing conventions for how speakers take turns speaking when they converse. This is the one thing that I believe it is better to explain the way our book brings it. So in the introduction, they mentioned the notion of register and the unity of texture. But this author also mentions that different theorists will give you different definitions for registers. But he mentions here Halliday. He also mentions Hassan, who used to work with them. But they will say that genres and subgenres, you can talk to them as registers or as genres, believing that the register already indicates a social function or not. You may simply talk about text types. It depends on the author. It depends on the theoretician. So that will vary, but he did offer the possibility of using Halliday's view of this. Of course, all of these will go into discourse analysis. If you analyze, for example, a classroom discourse, you have the classroom discussion, you have a study group, you'll have a teacher student conference. All of these are more specific. They are subgenres of this genre. Here they give examples also from the British National Corpus, called BNC, and the International Corpus of English, which is called ICE. I know we are tempted to call it ICE, but don't put it on ice. We've already mentioned the differences between spoken and written registers and how these notions are sometimes clearly cut, but they may interpolate, they may overlap. Às vezes, a noção do que é um registro escrito, um registro oral, podem se sobrepor. Uma coisa pode ser escrita com características de textos orais, por ser informal, ou pode ser oral numa situação formal seguindo o roteiro, tendo características de textos escritos. Okay? When it comes to the unity of structure, let's talk about our registers, which may be a closed register or an open register. An open register means that we don't know what's coming next. Suppose you start talking to your classmate. Você começa a bater papo com seu coleguinha aí do seu lado. Você sabe o que ele vai falar? Depois que ele te conta um caso, você sabe o que ele vai te contar depois? Ele pode te falar qualquer coisa. É um registro aberto. E se você está indo para uma loja? Hello, may I help you? Yes, please. I need this. How much? Do you take credit cards? Thank you, have a nice day. Sabe aquela conversa que parece que é um NPC? Seriously, it's like a non-playable character. What they say is almost memorized. It's a closed register. Claro que alguns são híbridos. Uma aula tende a ser um registro mais aberto, você não sabe o que a pessoa vai falar. Mas tem algumas características que são típicas daquele registro, uma aula. E uma ida ao médico? O médico vai te perguntar se você tem um problema, você vai falar se você tem ou não um problema, ele vai te receitar alguma coisa. It's a closed register. When it comes to spoken registers, when you analyze speech, estamos falando da fala, não da língua. Lembra do Saussure, que tinha língua e tinha fala? Speech and language. Aqui é a fala, os enunciados, todos juntos, fazendo a fala daquela pessoa naquele contexto. A person may be having a dialogue. They may be talking to one person or to a whole audience in public. Maybe the speech is a monologue. It can be scripted, a theater play, for example. Or it can be unscripted, a spontaneous commentary, for example, a demonstration, a legal presentation. A lesson that I will teach usually has a plan, but it's not fully scripted. It's partly scripted, and it tends to be similar to a monologue if it is a lecture, but usually not really, because students can ask questions. I'm talking to a larger audience. So a lesson would be a dialogue with the public, even if it sometimes resembles a scripted monologue for certain periods of time. Again, there can be hybridism. It is possible, and our book mentions that. Here they give the examples of people transcribing an oral corpus and the symbols that they may add to this description. For example, the ICE uses the symbol. This is called a pound. This is a pound. Please don't call it a hashtag. Some Americans also call it a number sign, but that's not the name. This is a pound. And these are angle brackets. You put any kind of annotations in your corpus between angle brackets. Some people call them tags, but a tag is when it's automatic. If you annotate it by hand, it's an annotation, not a tag. But it comes between angle brackets, every annotation, including tags. So this is to divide what speakers say into text units. Here, the pauses, short pauses, long pauses, use commas. And they use other types to talk about overlapping. Which is how it happens. Here you have a full description. You may read it later. Please read the chapter thoroughly after this explanation, and you will see. They also talk about the transition relevant place, a place where you expect the speakers to change turns, where I finish something, a rising intonation, something you may even use punctuation to indicate. You have finished something you are saying and you expect an answer. Transition relevant places, TRPs, they are also indicated when you work with a transcribed oral corpus, for example. About written registers, they mention the types of writing. Is it academic prose, non-academic prose? Is it a poem? Is it fiction, non-fiction, letters, newspaper broadsheets? Is it a tabloid, a regional or local newspapers? A tabloid even has different shape and size for the paper. And yes, even the support, the type of paper, or the type of format for your screen will tell you something about the mode of how it is written, about this register, which will later indicate a different social function. If your newspaper is a large broadsheet, you may take it as something more serious, but if it is a letter-sized paper or an A4 paper, it's probably a tabloid, especially if it's yellow or green. Some people even refer to it as yellow journalism, meaning they don't take it so seriously because they know the news are exaggerated and often focusing a lot more on violent contents. So, the content will make a difference. Which takes us to the unity of texture, which I have already explained to you in a different way. But I gave you the very same explanations, just in a different way. It is closely related to syntax. But you will analyze clause by clause, then sentence by sentence. Remember, a paragraph can be the theme to the whole book. The rest of the book may be the rime. But you can also talk about theme and rime in clauses. And here they express all of this history. They will tell about everything that went behind. And the cohesive marks, markers of cohesion or cohesive links or connectives. But there are markers that may refer to reference, for example, a pronoun. Or substitution. Lexical cohesion is a term we often use, meaning I will replace things. Marcos introduced the lesson to you. The teacher went on saying that this professional continued at substitution. Or even the ellipsis. He explained the lesson and went on to. An ellipsis means it is the same person. So here you have all of these different examples. Please read it thoroughly. Lexical cohesion is more clearly established here. It's a term more used by Michael Halliday and Ruqayya Hassan, with lexical cohesion which establishes a link with the prior context, for instance, repeating a word mentioned earlier or using a synonym. We've already mentioned this. The use of conjunctions as connectives. I gave you examples in our PowerPoint presentations. They may be coordinating conjunctions such as and, or, but they may also be subordinating conjunctions. They will connect the ideas. Please read the summary. This exercise is quite the same as the activity that we have. Remember, this is chapter 4, but the exercise on our virtual campus, let me open it for you. This is task number 3. Why is that? Remember, task number 1 involved chapters 1 and 2. Task number 2 involved chapter 3. Task number 3 is based on chapter 4. Here, you have the questions. Why do some people feel that email has features, characteristics of both spoken and written English? Remember, email is written. But if your email is not formal, if it is informal, maybe you will include things more similar to a short text message, for example. It depends on the kind of email. But if it is very informal and short and more immediate, maybe some spoken characteristics will be there. Name some contexts better suited to writing than to speech. Are there situations in which you may rather send an email than call them on the telephone? It depends. How formal is it? How sensitive is it? Is it something that may touch their feelings? You will not easily give them bad personal news on a formal email. You may even prefer to talk to them face to face, right? But maybe if you want to give them detailed information about work, an email will be good enough. Explain. Give your own examples. Would the conversation between a patient and doctor have be part of an open or closed register? I mentioned this in the lessons. In the sentences below, which expressions will be considered old and which would be new? Lately, well, lately is just when it happens, but it is an idea. The boson area, I may say that all of this is guiding the person. It's the theme. Has been hit with a number of ice storms. So I have what I want to announce at the end, and everything else is given information. These storms have caused, I've already talked about the storms, numerous traffic accidents. It's what I'm announcing. They, who are they? They, these storms, right? These storms have also made sidewalks very slippery to walk on. Very slippery to walk on is what it caused the sidewalks to be. So this is new information, but I may add all of this if you want as the newsworthy piece of information, or just the noun with its complement here, because this is the direct object of make. This is the noun predicate referring to sidewalks. Perhaps very slippery to walk on is the new. But if you wish to include sidewalks, it would make sense. It's understandable. Style manuals frequently criticize the use of sentences in the passive voice. advising writers to prefer the active voice instead. Why is this? Is this good advice? Why? Remember, linking words are not ideational. They communicate only textual elements. So if you say that the news have been presented by, if instead you say they presented the news, it's going to be shorter, straight to the point. I'm not saying that an academic text can never have a passive voice. That's not it. But if it is possible, make it more straightforward. Go straight to the point. Instead of saying that one may observe on the above mentioned table that the data, the results were different from what was previously expected. How about table 1 displays results differing from the hypothesis originally presented in the paper. How about initially, right? Better. This is more straightforward, and I didn't use a lot of passive structures. That's why. So this may be good advice, but you don't need to take it to its full extent. Sometimes the passive voice may be necessary. You may wish to indicate that something has taken place, that something has been applied to it, rather than saying who did it. It is possible. But just saying who did what and when may be better in the paper. Although, if you wish to avoid I, in places where you cannot objectify it, you cannot turn the object into the agent, maybe you will end up having to resort to using the passive construction. Find two different types of cohesion. We've already expressed the different types of cohesion. Our text brought them. Read it thoroughly and find them here. If you have any issues, any doubts, feel free to contact me at any time.